Tourette's. Tourette's, white tics, and demonic channeling. So first, I want to go into what I read about what it says tics are. And I want you to think on because what I've noticed from a lot of things I've read in the Bible about different things, demonic type influences, and from movies to actual things I read in the TV, to actually my own experiences, and then to compare it to these game stalker things where there's this all this sneezing and coughing, or seemingly fake coughing, or these dang weird noises and stuff like that, or sometimes like slamming doors and stuff out of nowhere, or just seem like your ears are just hyper tuned to every noise of like, ooh, there's a siren here, there's a car here, and then they in the TI realms, they make out like everything is just super staged, and I don't think everything's that super staged, but it's possible. But again, I think it's more like a perfect storm. So I was just thinking about those things and what they say those things are, and then it was like, dang, why does that sound so familiar though? Why is it so familiar? You know what I'm saying? What illness does that remind me of? Right? Not just demonically, but recognized by the medical field, right? But they don't recognize it as demonic. They recognize it as a mental illness or biological illness or whatever, right? It's fascinating though. But what it says, Tourette syndrome is a neurological, what's wrong with me today? Neurological disorder, right? It's of the brain, a disorder of the brain, right? Characterized by involuntarily repetitive movements, vocalizations known as tics, usually appearing between ages 2 and 15. Key symptoms include multiple motor tics, eye blinking, shrugging, and at least one vocal tic, throat clearing, sniffing. While the exact cause is unknown, it is likely a combination of genetic factors, brain abnormalities. So what do scientists, you know what I'm saying? Brain abnormalities, neurotransmitters, and environmental influences. Oh, really? Right? Motor tics, eye blinking, facial grimacing, jaw movements, head jerking, shoulder shrugging, jumping, or touching objects. Vocal tics, throat clearing, coughing, sniffing, grunting, barking, sniffing, or yelping. Really? I just think when you want these so-called observing the so-called street theater, right? Or you feel like uncomfortable because it's so-called seems like you got some people just randomly hovering around you. If you're in a store, or you're outside, and then you just hear weird noises and shit, weird noises and stuff, right? And I'm sorry, but coming upon you, like I'm like, what the heck? Or it's just like, just think about that. But and here it sounds, what it says, they're vocal tics and they're involuntary, right? Complex vocal motor, repeating word phrases. You ever be in a room where people you've heard someone keep repeating the same thing repeatedly? Now, these are not just intrusive thoughts. These are things people actually say out loud. Not something you're supposedly just hearing in your own head and not sure if someone else telepathically hears that as well. But something that people actually say or do out loud, where everyone else can see it and hear it as well. You know what I'm saying? Undeniably, right? Repeating words and phrases, uttering vulgar, obscene words. Many individuals feel a physical sensation such as an itch or tension that builds up and is relieved by performing the tic. Tics can change over time, worsen with stress, anxiety, or fatigue. What's the cause of this stuff? They say it may run in family, it may be genetic, maybe something abnormal about the brain, some neurochemical imbalance, some environmental factor. Typically, it happens more in men than it does in females, right? But what does this have to do with demonic channeling? Now, those are the that's the medical symptoms. Those are the medical definitions of prior for the medical things that data that we have on there. But compared to demonic channeling, I just want y'all to take that in consideration. I was just thinking about, right? You know, when you if you ever heard of people having so-called split personalities, and it's actual disorder where it seems uncontrolled. And then there's also defense mechanisms where people have been traumatized, and it's more like an early stage of that, right? Where they purposely, intentionally try to put on some other persona, some other personality in defense that they think is going to safeguard them from experiencing or thinking whatever they don't want to think or whatever they don't want to feel, right? So they try to take on some other persona, right? In defense of their trauma, their situation of trauma and hurt or whatever. And that typically happens with children or young children or adults, people, but typically in children and youth. So let's think about that when people, whether they're a child or teenager or older adult or whatever, and they've experienced trauma repeatedly, and these all these type of attacks that we've went through, that we've talked about, right? And it's opening doors or creating breaches, as I said earlier, right? For these demonic entities to try to feel like they can go on a rant, they can, bombard us and attack us even more and get aggressive, where it seems like they can set up home to try to infest, right? But at first it starts with demonic channeling, where, they go back and forth, where the person might at first think it's voluntary for them to take on some other persona for as a defense mechanism, to where it becomes involuntary, where it becomes they adapt to it. They it's no longer an act, but something they actually see themselves as, right? Because they become used to it and conditioned that, this seems safer, and then those demonic things take over, right? And they channel back and forth, right? Where they seem they're one way and then they seem another completely different way, right? And so these things go back and forth. And then what it says, demons don't ever act individually. They act in clusters. They act in groups. It's like legions of them, as we've seen and read in the Bible, right? Where the demons never attack usually individually. They always attack like one. They're like wolves, or more than that. One attacks is like flies on poop, right? So it's like, it's like mob attacks is a better word, right? So when these things try to channel into, like if you ever watched a TV station and then it starts going staticky, and there's like some other channel coming across, and it starts to merge, and it's weird, and you hear multiple channels or multiple voices that sound distinctive from each other, but they're garbled, right? Or a radio station where you're listening to one station and it starts fading in out because some other station seems to be trying to overrule it and speak over it, right? So in those cases, those are like seem unclear, right? Where you can see that it's some sort of schism, something channeling, and then there's blatant ones that seem like they're going in and out, like the phases of the moon. You know what I mean? So Tics versus common gangster signaling, right? Or handler maintenance control. So again, that's what I'm talking about with this perfect storm type stuff, where it's very dangerous and precarious to feed too much into these things and not reference God. And I'm talking about not go to God, not seek guidance from God, how to respond to these things with faith, with faith in the Lord, not putting faith in these things, being aware of them, but knowing that you can rule over them. You don't have to give in to them, right? It's like being aware of a scheme or a playbook, but you don't have to go that way, right? You don't have to do what those things want you to do. It's like reading a script and then you decide to say something else. Right? I'm not gonna follow this script right here. I'm gonna do this over here instead. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like that. The more, at least from my perspective, the more we're aware of things, you don't just have to go with it. So the handlers, right, can use these things to a certain extent to try to maintain control or oppression or anxiety, so we're easier or seem easier to be able to manipulate and take over, because the more stressed the mind is, the body is, eventually it's going to break down, right? Oh, we either stumble and need to regroup, or stumble completely and break down, right? But if we're constantly seeking our rest in Christ, constantly seeking to pray and meditate on God's word and practice our faith, right? Again, this is just like being aware, reading a new news article or seeing a new news report. Someone try to rob a bank or shoot somebody, or there's a new war going on, but like, it doesn't faze you. It disheartens you, but it doesn't faze you from staying off, from going off course on what you chose to follow, what the path that you choose to take with the Lord. Like, oh yeah, new stuff. Oh, like, yeah, there's stuff going on. Okay, but I'm not gonna allow that those reports, right, of typical things still happening that are not good, and throw me off on the path that I've already decided I'm gonna go on, that I know is good, right? So anyway, different types of demonic affliction. Oppression and affliction, external, physical, or circumstantial attacks, include severe physical illness, financial ruin, broken relationships, or persistent heavy melancholy and depression, right? Obsession involves sudden, irrational, and persistent cycling evil thoughts, vivid nightmares of intense spiritual psychological warfare. Now, we talked about this before, right? With the deep fake dream manipulation and stuff like that, and V2K supposed harassment with weaponry, right? But these over here, demonic oppression, these are things that have actually been reported, right? Witnessed as having to do specifically with demons, as we already know for trust in the Bible, right? But it doesn't. There's actually has been people, like, for example, cycling of evil thoughts. That's an actually form of brainwashing that has been induced by certain people. What was it called? Psychic. It's called psychic driving, right? And was developed in the 1950s during the MK Ultra, right? With those secret government experiments, right? And they ran all these secret mind brainwashing experiments. It wasn't like they really wanted to, well, at least you would think, to brainwash their own people, but to have a military advantage as well, to be able to have a military arsenal as well on how to defend their soldiers, or how to be able to recover their soldiers from being brainwashed if they were took captive from other countries. as well as being able to implement such tactics should their military be able to capture some sort of enemy units or whatever, and be able to do those things to them, right? So therefore, so the whole point was to be able to have a military advantage as well, right? So, they would need to actually try to test those things out and experiment them. To an extent doesn't mean of course that you'll like that and appreciate that. You know what I'm saying? Because of all the things that is possible during war, especially if you think that war is fair, right? What's fair in war? But right. So these things where they repeat, the psychic driving is like those mantras, repeating the same mantras or getting over and over again in someone's head, and then trying to get them to act out on those things. So it's kind of like those people that have those magnifying glasses or whatever glued to their heads, and they are forced to watch these screens with flashing images, or when they flash all these different images and trying to cause a reaction, a mental reaction or a mental condition in the brain by observing these different images and sounds on the screen, where they can't look nowhere else. It's like they're forced to look at this screen, this big screen. Right? What is that one called? Oh yeah, so it's called I don't know how you say that, but it's called the Ludovico technique, which involves being subject, restrained, and forced to watch disturbing imagery with their eyes held open, while being given nausea, while being induced with drugs, right? This form of aversion conditioning is designed to associate violence with physical illness. But of course, if they're I'm gonna get into that in a minute, right? But if you have these so-called deep fake dream manipulations or whatever, right? And you're aware of them, you're aware that they're dreams, you recognize them as fake, but you don't seem to be able to have any control as you would if it was actually your dream. So you might be lucid, so-called semi-awake or conscious that it's a dream, right? And what you would normally do, how you would try to fight it or change the scene, something, right? And you can't do nothing, then it's not your dream. It's not your environment, right? You're just forced to watch it. You're projected there. It's like you're projected in a room where the room's projected toward you. Like it's a holographic room, but you're in the same spot. You know what I'm saying? But it's not holographic. So anyway, so it's kind of like the same scenario, just in a different way, right? Where you're forced to be aware of these different scenarios, but it's direct attacks to your mind, where they're constantly playing, just like that. But I mean, if you can't control them, you can't dismiss them, you can't control when they enter, right? Then they're not your thoughts, they're not your images, they're not your fantasies, not your dreams. So you don't have to feed into it. You can dismiss and reject it, but it's difficult because, again, they try to be as alarming as possible, but at the same time, it's a benefit to you, right? The fact that they're so alarming, they're so disturbing, it's traumatic, but it's like, ooh, you know that you don't want to follow that, you don't want to do that. You'll usually have a distinctive reaction to that hurts you, that angers you, or that makes you feel some other kind of way that you don't want to feel, right? That was introduced in the movie Lost or whatever, and it was on a movie called A Clockwork Orange, but it's called the Ludovico technique, where your eyes are held open and you're forced to watch flashing imagery. That's extremely disturbing, right? Anyway, right? So that's obsession, right? Involves sudden, irrational, persistent, cycling evil thoughts, vivid nightmares of intense spiritual, psychological warfare. Possession involves the highest body faculties, temporary, sporadic, involuntary control of speech. Strength, erratic, violent, self-injurious behavior. Temper flares, aversion and avoidance of sacred things or actions taken to boldly desecrate, blaspheme, or disrespect, or are actions taken to boldly desecrate, blaspheme, or disrespect. So in this sense, right, possession says is supposed to be the highest form, right? You're involuntarily, right? You don't seem to be in control of what you say, right? You have a lot of strength, or the people are very strong. They have an erratic temper. Right? Very erratic, short temper, right? They're self-injurious, or they try to injure others, or they're accident prone, right? What's the other thing? They either avoid things that they would supposedly or should care about, like or you claim that you love Jesus, or you claim the Bible, but right, you feel a schism when you're trying to read the Bible, or when you're trying to pray, or being around holy or sacred things, or wanting to go to church. All of a sudden you feel some type of way about going to church, right? Or about reading the Bible, or about praying, right? You feel something trying to fight you, or influence you not to do those things, not to do what you should be doing, right? Or you got the extreme other spectrum of that, to where they got these things trying to blatantly trying to make you blaspheme those things. You know, they're very vicious, vulgar, blasphemous thoughts to desecrate. Now all of a sudden you want to rip up your Bible, right? Or you want to curse God, or you want to curse people that you love, or those people want to curse people those people curse things that they love, that they claim to be holy, or they're violent towards them, or they're aggressive, right? They go out their way to try to destroy things. Then they might see a church and they want to put graffiti all over it, right? Or destroy or bust the windows, stuff like that, right? Or burn the Bible, things like that, right? Infestation says the lowest form, right? Is involves the environment, homes, animals, objects, and weather. And that's when seems like that matrix type stuff to you, right? Where you go to extremes. So, is this a matrix? And in the spiritual sense, it's demonic. It's spirits where seemingly you hearing weird sounds in the home, weird things creaking. The temperature seems to go up. Things are going on with the weather, or a heater comes on when it should be off, or whatever, or the light, you try to turn the light on, the light don't want to come on, weird stuff, right? Or sounds, the weather seems real sporadic, or you're hearing creeping things on the floor, stuff like that, right? Or you're wondering if there's ghosts around, stuff like that, right? Demonic temptation, influence where through lies and deception, evil spirits attempt to lead individuals into bondage or fear. Demonic oppression, a spiritual schism, demons trying to use compulsion tactics to cause self-harm or personal harm. Two stone or multiple stone. I talked about this before, right? Where it's never really just about you or so and so and so and so. These things try to get as many people as hurt as possible, as many people captive as possible. They try to take down as many people as possible. It may seem like they're only after a certain so-and-so or so-and-so, but really, the more people, the more they try to triangulate their schemes, and the more people see involved because they really want to take down all those people that are in that scenario. Even though those people don't seem like they're on the opposite ends of the war, right? The real mastermind behind that is trying to really get all of them. All of them are his enemies to him, right? He wants to get them all in check, right? A radioactive, toxic firewall, selective tuning or manipulation, experimental control clause, simulated media, psychic driving stage responses, good cop, bad cop, host and frenzy, staged attacks and reactions. Reactive cueing, attempts for false synchronization, talked about it before. Stage simultaneous movement, speech, interception, conflicting, absurd, unrelated, intrusive thoughts. Random pain, itching, erogenous zones, erogenous sensations, chest, growing, hind. Forgetfulness, hiccups, throat, chest, nose congestion. Clumsy, random loss of hand or feet control. This has happened to me so many times. I'm like, what the heck, man? I want to hiccup when I don't want to hiccup. Like, well, I'll just randomly want to scratch my nose or some other area of my body out of nowhere. And like, I can't for the life of me figure out why it's itchy or why my head just decided to hurt or why I'm sweating and it's not even hot. No one else seems to be hot but me. And I'm talking about or I'm cold and no one's been cold. I'm over here trembling or hands shaking or whatever. Right? Extreme symptoms would be sleep or conscious paralysis. I'm talking about sleep. Sometimes people feel like they're caught between sleep and awake, where they want to wake up completely, but they feel stuck in their sleep. And then there's sometimes there seems to be when you're actually awake, but it seems like your body's so stiff, so you feel so drained in energy that it's hard for you to move or want to move. It's like you need to get up and do some stuff, but you just feel like, dang, my body feels tired, but my mind wants to get up. You know what I'm saying? I want to get up, but my body is tired. Or my body wants to get up, but my mind is tired. Weird crap like that, right? Where it's just spiritual. Your energy just feels so drained, right? You feel like a drained battery, right? And people are like, "What the hell happened? I'm so sleepy, or I'm so tired, or I feel so weak out of nowhere," right? So lethargic. I'm gonna try to tie this up. This is gonna have to have a part 2 and 3. But anyway, where was I at? Yes. Extreme symptoms, sleep or conscious paralysis, suicidal, homicidal ideations, temporary or permanent blindness, epileptic seizures, deafness or inability to speak. I'm wondering if I actually had some type of seizure. I fainted twice and I've never fainted before. Beforehand, I was like 4 years, a few years ago, just out of nowhere. I was only a block down my street, a block from my residence. So I was like, what the hell, just walking or riding my bike. Just got a headache out of nowhere and felt and then fell out. And then the thing about it is, then you read about these so-called weaponries, and they say in their little forums or whatever, in the little arsenal packets, they say like, that these things can cause us to they can stage major health issues on us. right? And then you read about in demonic entries, those are things they do anyway, are capable of doing. So again, it's a perfect storm, right? You don't want to believe that this is the government, right? You don't want to believe that this is the Satan, supposedly all powerful, and just God just gave him this candy store of damn weapons where he can do whatever to us, or it's just some supposed elite group of a handful of people that are super powerful and they can just do whatever they want, and there's going to be no accountability or consequence for these things, or that we just, have no responsibility in the things that happen to us at all, as if, hey, we're just completely innocent newborn babes with these just being attacked, right? As if we don't have no strength, no perseverance, or we're flawless, right? As if there's no license for us to be able or should have to go through any of these things. And none of all that is true. All of those are little fragments of here, there, and there, right? So again, this is why it's vital to go to God for guidance, to seek God's guidance for yourselves individually in your own journeys and your own tasks and your own experience. Seek his guidance in his word for you and your particular afflictions, your particular temptations, right? For your family, for yourself, right? For your community, right? So you don't, because it's what it say, perfect love casts out fear. That's not perfect love. That's not love, right? That's hoopla. Well, it's not all hoopla, but that's not love, right? That's just like that sounding board, what it talks about in 1 Corinthians 3, where it talks about, this big sounding board, all these things going off, but it's just like you're aware of all this stuff, but where's your love? Where's your faith? Where's your hope? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, random loss of hand or feet control, cause stumbling, need to urine, need to defecate, gas, bloating, belching, migraine, random chest pain, cramps, dizziness, excessive sweating, uncontrolled tremors, inability to speak, deafness. Biblical reference, right? The little boy thrown in water and fire, Mark 19:17-29. The man with a legion of demons between the tombs cutting himself, Mark 5, verses 2-20. The man of leprosy, crippled at the pool of Bethesda, John 5, verse 4-24. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and many unnamed women healed of 7 demons and diseases, in Luke chapter 8, verse 2-3, and Ephesians 5:23 to Ephesians 5, verse 23-30, right? Feigned ignorance or personal knowledge of info. No, I'm talking about people, right, around us, right, or ourselves, right? Feigned ignorance or personal knowledge of info they should know or should never know. Just think about that for a minute. Feigned knowledge, feigned ignorance. Either you're feigning ignorance or you're feigning personal knowledge. Or you pretending to know something, or it seems like they're pretending to know something. Like, how the hell do you know that? There's no possible way you should know that. Why you pretend like you know so much about that? Right? What the hell, man? Feigned ignorance or personal knowledge of info they should know or should never know. Right? Such as carnal, intimate knowledge. Like they act like super comfortable around you, like they know some stuff about you, have been bosom buddy with you and whatnot. Like, no, you haven't. You know what I'm saying? How some people might be crazy enough to come at you or approach you and whatnot, or talk crap around you, like yo, you have no connection with me. You know what I'm saying? Or no connection with my family in an actual way. But I'm like, what are you talking about, yo? What do you be dreaming and fantasizing about? Oh, never mind. I don't want to know. Right? Either way, it's not reality. But yet they swear it is, right? Carnal, intimate knowledge Family knowledge. They act like they know stuff deeply about you and your family to the T, details. Like what you just read? My Facebook? So you think you know everything about my family? You know what I'm saying? Like, what the heck? You know what I'm saying? Family knowledge. Or prayer room knowledge, right? Like, there are those counselors of Nebuchadnezzar watching Daniel in every room that he's praying, right? And they watch him. They know all his prayers. They know what he talks about, what he says to God. And then they try to play it back at him and mocking him as if those things aren't going to happen, as if they can block those things or inhibit them prayers some type of way, right? These things are chosen for triggering intimidation, submissiveness, or increased hostility and desired combativeness, right? Resistance or what I say, they trying to trigger, they want you to be intimidated or submissive to them, bow down to them or whatnot, or they want to escalate it even more. They actually want you to be hostile to them, or want to fight them, be combative, or resist them, or distance and separate from you. They either do it to get you, to try to force you to be closer to them, or force you to be away from them. Depends on what their goal and their intention are. But remember, there's double agents. There's people that are actually, they're not, Satan. You know what I'm saying? They're agents. They're engagers. They're trying to engage you. I'm not just saying that regular people are regularly that, but I'm talking about recognizing that God is over everything. God is greater than everything. So why is God allowing these people to be used upon us, or us used upon these people? So it's like, it's a buffering, it's a refinery, and everyone involved in it is being buffed or refined, engaged, and tested, and purified. Some are being made worse, but that's usually by their own choice, and they don't recognize it, right? And others are actually refining, right? But everyone in that foundry, everyone in that oven is getting cooked. You know what I'm saying? But what's going to come of them is a whole nother thing. You know what I'm saying? Using simulated dream cycling, V2K projection, street theater to alternate and manipulate the environment through gaslighting. Examples: portraying you in a dream as a child. Now, this is a part where it can be extremely traumatic, right? Because when you recognize that you're not the one creating the Minecraft, right? When it's actually not your dream that you can alternate, only your observer. Recognize, though, that you're an observer, forced to observe these things, right? But they can alternate how that camera angle works, right? So where it can be bewildering to you sometimes if you're not aware of that. If you don't discipline yourself to recognize things, right? Because you're still lucid, but you can't do the things that you would do if you were in a normal sense of lucidity, or however you say the word. But anyway, right? So you can't alternate anything, but you can discern, right? But in particular examples, right, of gaslighting, where they're able to alternate or manipulate the environment, consider how traumatic that can be if they can portray you, for example, as a child or an adult, right? Child or an adult, right? Being violently abused or raped by a family member or a spouse or a partner or a friend or a peer or a coworker or a stranger, right? Or worse yet, as the perpetrator, as the one doing those things, violently raping or abusing, right? Or stealing or killing or whatever the hell, right? Either they play you as the bad guy or they play you as the victim. Either way, you know what I'm saying? But they alternate how you look at it. If they put you as a child, you may get psyched into thinking that you're helpless. You can't do nothing. You're a child, right? Or if they portray you as an adult, you may be psyched to thinking that you're invincible, right? Especially if you're a bad guy, so or they put you in a bad play you as a villain. Somehow that might psych you into thinking you start really channeling those ideas, saying, oh, is this really me? It looks like me. The angle of it sounds like me, looks like me. I guess it is me, right? But it isn't, right? And then you chime in with it, right? In the voiceovers, they sound just like you, right? Or look just like you, but their characterization is completely incongruent, unnatural, and uncharacteristic, right? Demonic possession, no obvious resistance. The individual seems to hold and portray a completely different personality or split personalities, right? Where they don't seem to be going back and forth or fighting. It just seems like, oh, dang. They completely went over. They completely believe they're so-and-so and so-and-so and act that way, right? Like you call them by a different name and they actually respond to it and be like, hey, what? Don't say or whatever. Like, for example, you called me Sally and I responded and walked up to you and looked to you like you was talking to me, and that's not my dang name. You know what I'm saying? Like, the heck up. You know what I mean? But anyway, I'm going to tie this up right now, and then I'm going to go into more detail on in a part 2. But points of resistance, I'm going to go in my part 2, I'm going to go into detail about these points of resistance, these movies that I brought up, right? The Butterfly Effect, 2004. Evan goes back trying to stop severe child abuse and traumatic life patterns, appearing as a child, but with present knowledge and consciousness. Now, so the point of that is, okay, if they try to portray us as a child, or portray us as an adult, or portray us as so-and-so and so-and-so, but yet you know in your mind, even though you're not present in the actual action, you're observing this so-called actor acting like you, using your image as an avatar, or someone you love as an avatar, but you're consciously aware, hey, this is not right, right? You don't have to follow through with that. When you wake up, you don't have to comply with, you don't have to follow that pattern, that wavelength, right? Because your present mind is not in agreement with that. That's not where your soul and heart is.